Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you again today. Thank you for everyone who joined us for part 2 of the 3-part series. And the focus of this series, as you know, is what got you here won't get you there. Today's session is focused upon reframing your approach to employee attraction and retention. And just as we started out before the last session, I would love it if everyone could just put a little shout out into the chat box. And here's how I'll know if you can hear me. I'm actually going to do a shout out to recognize anyone who is an entrepreneur who happens to be joining us today, because don't know if you knew it or not, but today is Global Entrepreneurship Week. So I thought that'd be a great way for everyone to let me know if you're here. Those of you who are entrepreneurs, just put a little message in the box so I know you hear me. And those of you who aren't, why don't you put a little thumbs up or congrats to those of us who are. All right, Kate from PA. All right, Liesel, wonderful. All right, Jessica, okay, so that tells me that everyone can hear. Wonderful. So let's jump right in and get started. All right, so here's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be doing our session kickoff, and then we're going to be going over some things that have developed since we were last together. I like to call that hot off the press, breaking news. Then we're going to transition over to the big picture for winning the talent war. And then from there, we're going to transition to the 4-pronged approach that we're going to recommend in order to tackle your unique challenges, because there's no doubt that for everybody who's joining us today, each of you has definitely something unique or multiple facets of something unique to the challenges that you're currently facing. So there's no such thing as a one size fits all approach. And that's certainly something that we recognize. So for those who were able to be with us last week, you understand that the first session was focused upon understanding your current reality and all that goes into that. Of course, that focused heavily upon various data and statistics relative to the current state of affairs, especially since the pandemic. In addition to that, we're going to be focusing today, of course, on reframing your approach, but I also want to make sure you remember to keep it at top of mind for our third and final session in this 3-part series, which is really going to be focusing upon effectively recruiting and retaining through the use and development of, I should say, a meaningful employer brand. And in fact, the person who will be leading the third and final session is the person you see on the right hand of your screen here, Amanda Kochirka. Amanda, could you just take a quick moment to introduce yourself to everybody? I know we have many people who are joining us for the first time today who weren't with us last week. Oh, and it looks like Amanda possibly cannot speak, but I will tell you that Amanda is amazing and you're going to enjoy your time with Amanda next week. Oh, okay. So it looks like poor Amanda. She's telling me, hey, you have to unmute me. So that was my fault. Let me just quickly unmute Amanda. Amanda, you may now speak.
Perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. Excited to be back with you all for session 2 of our series. And, since we covered last week a lot of the sort of basics of what we're dealing with right now and what's causing some of those challenges, now we're really going to start focusing on tactics. So that's what Elizabeth's going to talk about today. That's what I'm going to talk about next week. And I think what I'm talking about next week related to employer branding really ties well into my background, which you'll see is pretty marketing heavy. A lot of the best practices that I'm going to be talking about related to employer branding are really not all that different from best practices for marketing to your customers or another company if you're a B2B organization. So really excited to be part of this series and to be part of the DA team. I've been on board since March. Prior to that, as you can see, with the Erie Regional Chamber, the Small Business Development Center. So I've really spent a lot of time consulting with local companies and nonprofit organizations through my work at the Nonprofit Partnership to help them grow and thrive. So thankful for this opportunity to present with Elizabeth, and we'll get moving here.
All right, great. And if you can't tell, I'm working from home. You probably heard a little bark. That was not me in response to what Amanda said, but rather that was my sweet little dog who's sleeping next to me. And what a relevant segue that is for what it is we're talking about today, as we really look at and evaluate some of the things that employers are finding themselves having to do in order to compete. So I'd like to transition from here to really focus on some things that are hot off the press. All right. So there has been a lot of activity here at Decision Associates, as there always is, relative to the recruitment efforts that we do on behalf of our clients, some of whom may even be joining us today. But what I really want to share with you, because nothing paints a picture like the reality that's unfolding before our eyes. So I thought, when we got together and we're prepping for today's session, we thought to ourselves, gosh, there's been a lot going on that we could really share with everyone to help really paint the picture of what we are even experiencing on the front lines. And we're pretty confident it mimics what many of you are experiencing as well. So what you see in front of you is an actual email that was received by, of course, we anonymized everything, right? By John Doe, who was a finalist for a mid-career level role. And that was with an organization, again, which was anonymized, ABC company, as you see here. But this is an email that he sent to us after he was well down the path of the interview process. In fact, he was one of 2 finalists remaining to be considered for this role. And why don't you type into the chat box, those of you who were with us last week, why don't you type into the chat box for everyone to see what it is you recall us sharing in particular about mid-level career candidates. I'm just testing to see if that resonated with those who were with us last week. What is something you recall from what we learned about mid-level career candidates? Yes, absolutely. They are very choosy. 46% of mid-level career candidates. Said differently, 46% of your mid-level career employees are actively looking to move. It's the largest group leaving, which means it's the largest group that are being sought after. So excellent. Good job, Jeff, Susan, Luann, and everyone else who chimed in. Excellent job. So I'm going to give you a moment to take a look at this. You can see that John Doe informed us that he accepted an offer from another organization. And while he was and consistently told us, because of course we've followed all the advice that we give to people such as those joining us today, and we keep in constant contact with candidates every step of the way so that they're never left wondering what the status is. They said, hey, even though I was quite interested, this position offers a 100% remote opportunity, and they have really sweetened the pot by giving me far above and beyond what I even asked for in regards to salary and benefits. So that is one. So, shout out, which we appreciate. This candidate mentioned it was a very organized, professional process, perhaps one of the most they've been through. But even despite that, we lost out on this excellent candidate. So let's take a look at the next current event. So this is a text received by Jim Doe, a completely different finalist for a completely different level role. This is a senior level leadership role as a member of the executive team within an organization. And you'll notice that Jim Doe sent a text message, which you can see right here. You can see that Jim Doe reached out to me. It was a Saturday morning, and Jim Doe decided that he was going to send an email withdrawing as a candidate for ABC company. Now, again, this is anonymized, so this is not with the same company that was showcased on the previous slide, but I just made up, again, a fictitious name of a company. And you'll see, again, because I want to keep it anonymous, I did not put the actual title of the position, but he continued to focus his search on, for other roles. And I will share with you some behind the scenes knowledge is that Jim Doe was also a finalist and, for other opportunities, but certainly hadn't secured another position yet. However, Jim was willing to withdraw himself from candidacy for the position. So I sent some follow-up communication to try to salvage Jim's interest on behalf of our client. And I'd like you to take a look at Jim's response. I just wish they would have followed through with deciding by when they indicated. I'm the type of person that believes in communication, and if I say it, I will do it. That is the kind of place I'm looking for in terms of culture from the top down. I will hold off on sending the email and wait for some word early next week. I'm still very interested, but I also continue to pursue other opportunities for obvious reasons. Okay. So again, I want you to really process and digest everything we're showing you. The next thing I'd like to show you as being quote unquote hot off the press is the response to a poll that we posted on our Decision Associates LinkedIn page, which has 2,024 followers. We posted this on November 4th, and we kept it open for a handful of days, actually for 4 days, I believe. And you can see the question that we posed, and you can see the responses. 42% wanting to choose when they go into the office, 27% wanting to work 50% remote, 50% in the office, 15% equally between wanting to work entirely remote or wanting to work entirely in the office. Now, before some of you who may be joining us might be thinking, well, wait a minute, this is not useful data. This is not interesting to me because I'm from a manufacturing organization, or I'm from an organization where it's impossible to even allow people to work remotely, or I'm not hiring mid-level or executive level roles. I'm only hiring entry-level roles. I want you still to take a look at exactly what you see. And someone joining us from Verify Services posed a question to the group. I wonder, of the 42% who want to choose, how often they may want to choose to do so. That is an interesting question, and certainly something that we could further delve into through a subsequent poll. And you know what? Amanda, who's helping to produce today's webinar, if you could just make a note of that question, Amanda, and we will definitely take a look at that. Luann asked how many respondents made up the results. I am not positive off the top of my head. I don't recall. It certainly wasn't anything close to the 2,024 followers. I believe it was closer to 34 respondents, if my memory serves me correctly. But certainly it's interesting to get a flavor of what it is people are thinking about out there. All right. Here is the next thing that I just thought was interesting to share, because clearly, just by virtue of the fact that you're joining us today, it would suggest that many of you have responsibilities for recruitment. So I thought everyone would appreciate what I found on a LinkedIn feed posted publicly by, you can see this individual, her name is Katie Minahan. Take a look at it. How many of you can relate to this? Those of you who have recruitment responsibilities. And if you can relate to it, put a little message in the chat box. Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to, I was very strategic about what it was I shared with you, because it was amazing to me as everything unfolded in the sequential order that I shared with you today. It was amazing to me, the picture that it painted and how it fit into what we're here to talk about. So let me ask you the question, all right? And this is where it's going to be important for you to participate. What is it you're noticing? So let's start with that. What are you noticing? Nick shares something interesting. We do programmatic recruiting, and the cost per apply is up 300 to 1,000%. Oh, yes, not surprised. We have less applicants. Jessica, you're absolutely right. That is something you're noticing. Oh, Kathy, potential candidates are not available after 2 weeks. Yes. That is something we're noticing as well. What else are you noticing specifically from what it is we shared with you? Ghosting. Ghosting. Now, ghosting, the way I look at it, is where a candidate just doesn't reply, doesn't show up to interviews, and they just fall off the planet Earth, which definitely, Luann, by virtue of the fact that you just put that, chances are you've experienced it more than ever before. And I'm sure many people on today's webinar have as well. I will say that none of what I shared with you, I would say qualifies as ghosting, because certainly the candidates that I showed you were responsive and they wanted to share their thoughts. Okay. Erin, Amanda, I would love for you to weigh in about what you personally notice from the examples and the snippets that I shared. And let me do a proper introduction of Erin. Aaron works closely with me here at Decision Associates. He works closely with me. He works closely with Amanda. And together, the three of us, in addition to Julie, who is dedicated 100% to sourcing candidates, the four of us make up the human capital team here at Decision Associates. So Aaron, Amanda, could you weigh in for the group? What is it that you are noticing?
Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining today. What an awesome topic to be covering. What we're noticing, Luann mentioned ghosting. We do, obviously, most of our recruiting engagements are professional recruitment, and vice president, president, CHROs, executive vice president. And we've actually noticed that, Luann, at that level. And I've in 20 plus years of recruiting for organizations, and then and then as a recruiter, we've never seen that. The other piece we've seen is the candidates are looking for more information about the company, about the opportunity much earlier in the process. Compensation, questions that were maybe taboo a year ago, 18 months ago, 100%. They're asked benefits right in the early engagements. The other is demanding remote work. I know that the study, of the participants, 15% said it, but we're noticing that they're saying, I expect this position to be remote. So those are just a couple things.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think on my end, it's, it goes back to open channels of communication and flexibility, not just on the candidate side, meaning that they're expecting flexibility with the positions. I think it's the flexibility, and the emails and texts that Elizabeth showed at the beginning of the session speak perfectly to that, that there's an expectation of flexibility on the client side when it comes to the actual hiring process. We're in discussion right now with a candidate who is, or a client who's got a pretty tight deadline for getting a position filled. And so we had a discussion yesterday about how can we condense the process so there's fewer steps of the interviews, but we're still making sure that the candidate is meeting all the people on the team that they need to meet in order for them to feel comfortable making a decision. So, and for the client to feel comfortable making a decision. So that flexibility piece is just becoming more and more important on both sides of the desk. So keeping that in mind as we move forward is going to be really important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So now that we know what that's, what we're noticing and what that might suggest, that really helps us transition to where it is. Even before seeing any of those examples that I had no idea, I didn't have a crystal ball. I didn't know those communications were going to be forthcoming this past week, even though I was well underway with prepping for today's session. But it was just mind blowing how it fed into the material that I prepared for you. And that is, let's take a look at the big picture for winning the war on talent. And, big picture, Everything has changed, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're located. It doesn't matter the level of talent you're trying to attract or retain. It could be entry level, mid-level, executive level. It doesn't matter what your industry it is. Heck, it doesn't even matter what you're paying. I'm telling you, no matter what, everything has changed. And what happens when everything has changed? You, as an organization, your leadership team, your approach to recruitment, your approach to retention, it needs to change. You need to change with it, right? You need to lead differently. You need to lead the recruitment process differently. You need to lead and facilitate the retention process in a different manner. And why is that? Well, you'll see the quote at the very bottom. This quote was on a slide for our first session, and it was so important that I wanted to include it again today. Like it or not, agree with it or not, here we are, right? And I think it's safe to say it's no longer up for debate. This pandemic, which we all wish never happened and has created nothing but headache in many aspects of our lives, it has forced everyone to take stock of their lives and has given all of us an opportunity to reimagine it. So what does that mean? It means that job seekers and your employees truly have infinite choices. Just for the heck of it, as I was preparing for today's session, I went out and I was even just taking a look. Don't worry, Aaron and Amanda. I was out taking a look on LinkedIn, just even to see, okay, surely there can't be infinite choices for people, at my level with such a narrow scope of, of what it is that I do. And I was blown away. There were literally several hundred positions, almost all of which were completely remote, that I could go and apply for. Now, fortunately, I'm not interested in doing that because, all the other important boxes are being checked in my particular situation. But it was just a way for me to do research and show, wow, there truly are infinite choices for job seekers and employees. The workforce makeup has shifted. It now has wildly different expectations. If I had $1 for every client who is so frustrated by this, with whom we speak, Aaron, Amanda, I'm sure you'll agree, who says, but that's not how we've done it before. We never had to do it that way before. We're not going to change. We're not going to do it differently. We understand the hesitation. We really do. And to be honest, I forgot which one of you put in the chat box just the dramatic cost increase that you're experiencing, that you're noticing as it relates to recruitment. Yeah, it's hitting your pocketbooks much deeper, your balance sheets much deeper as an organization than it ever has before, your recruitment budget. But really, in order to become relevant, notice I didn't say to stay relevant, because spoiler alert, if you're here joining us, you're no longer relevant as it relates to trying to attract and retain the people that you're struggling to attract and retain. So what had been working pre-pandemic probably isn't working now, right? So your style of leadership and your approach must change, not to stay, but to become relevant. So what does that really look like? I wanted to just throw a few things out there to you to consider before we get into, before we move beyond this slide. And really, there's a lot that you can look at, I'll just say, and we're going to delve more deeply into this as we progress. But there's a lot for you to look at as it relates to how to streamline your processes, right? And I know we talked a little bit about that during our first session, but when we're talking about your processes and streamlining them, take a look at the not just the process of applicant contact and reviewing and scanning candidates, but also how you go about screening them, how you go about interviewing them, what your offer process looks like, what your pre-boarding process looks like. Oh, what? You don't have a pre-boarding process that's really formulated? You only ever really think about the onboarding process? Well, it's time to get one. And when we talk about pre-boarding, that's really about figuring out what you can get out of the way and get them started on, to really, begin to get them excited about and integrated into your culture before day one. before they arrive. It's what you can do to really get them entrenched in and excited about who you are, what you do, and how you do it before they start. So many of us, right? So many of you on this call, even probably today, really focus on what to do on day one or week one. And what do? You inundate your new hires. Again, this applies to new hires at all levels. You inundate them with paperwork, that day one paperwork that everyone has to do, the mandatory safety overview, all the basic, touring around to meet key stakeholders, learning all the policies, all the procedures, looking at binders full of documents that you need them to look at in order to check all the boxes from, the requirements that you have, in order to even make sure that they're ready to hit the ground running. You inundate them with those things. Well, is that really a meaningful experience? So really be mindful at how you design that pre-boarding experience. What can you get done before they come through your door so that day one, that first day experience is really well thought out, well designed, and you have a 30, 60, 90-day plan to integrate them into your culture and into what it is they need to know, stretched out over time with spaced out learning, of course, right? Especially for those of you in manufacturing, you have to have the safety and the core content early on. We understand you need that before they can do anything, but it's time to really take a fresh look at how you go about doing that. All right. So I think I've probably emphasized that enough. Let's go to the next phase of what that big picture for winning the talent war is. It goes like this, folks. You have two jobs. Job number one, and it is in this order on purpose. Job number one is to win in the workplace. Job number two is to win in the marketplace. Said differently, it is impossible for any of you to win in the marketplace, to get those candidates that are so difficult to get, if you're not first winning in the workplace. If you don't have a culture that stands out far above the rest, now more than ever, your candidates know about it. And how do they know about it? Well, there are many, many, many different, really different places that candidates go to do research about you before even deciding to throw their hat into the ring. And yes, this applies to candidates at all levels in every industry. So all of us have heard of employer ranking sites like Glassdoor. I mean, all of us have probably heard of that, correct? But there are also other ranking sites as well. And I want to throw it out to the group. Why don't you share with everybody about some of the employer ranking sites that you personally might be aware of, or maybe even you yourselves have gone to, just to do a little investigative work of how candidates and current employees perceive your organization. So I'm not seeing lots of people putting things up there. In fact, I'm not seeing anybody. And that's okay. Because what that suggests is this is one opportunity. Glassdoor, yes, Doug. Yep, Glassdoor, absolutely. I bet you that's the most well-known. Kathy, you're correct. Indeed also has a ranking component as well, where candidates can check out before they even choose to apply, what it is they would like to apply for. And I will tell you, folks, whether you knew this or not, it's not just for existing employees or former employees to rank. There are also sites, and I'm going to rattle off a whole bunch of them to you in a moment here. There are also sites that rank the interview and application experience, the recruitment experience. Okay. And so I just think that's really important for you to know. So if you're not winning in the workplace, if you can't demonstrate that you have a great culture, and it can't just be something fancy that's slapped up on a board, up on a bulletin board and a rah-rah speech that's given once or twice a year at annual or biannual meetings or at a company picnic or holiday party. No, no, no. It needs to be a great culture that's very intentional and integrated into everything you do, including your recruitment and retention efforts. So I just thought it would be helpful for me to rattle off to everybody exactly what some of these employer ranking sites are. There's Glassdoor, of course, and thank you, Kathy, for sharing that with the group. Indeed, I almost forgot about that. They do also have a ranking system. Now, did you know there are two that are unique to female job seekers who want to check out how female friendly your workplace is and your application process is? And those two employer ranking sites are Fairygodboss, as well as, I'm just looking real quick, as well as In Her Site. In Her Site. So those are two that are unique to female job seekers. So before they even decide to throw their hat into the ring, before they even decide to join your organization, they're doing their homework to see how female friendly you are, for example. Then there are general employer ranking sites like Glassdoor. Indeed has a component. There's Vault, there's Career Bliss, there's Jobcase, there's Blind, there's Comparably. Those are some others that I bet you didn't even know existed. And we will make sure that we share with everybody what exactly those are in the follow-up communication that we send to you after today's session, which will include a live recording. So what else does it mean to win in the workplace by creating a great culture? Erin, do you mind if I ask you to weigh in about this question and from your perspective, being on the front lines, what you would suggest everyone thinks about?
Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. I think the first thing, if you drive down, you think about the way that employers start advertising. Some of you are in the Erie area, there's $15 an hour billboards all throughout the community for particular employers, entry-level jobs. And what Elizabeth and I and Amanda and I talked about leading into this, if you're gonna go at that, if we're going to try and, I'm going to pay you 15 cents an hour more, $1 an hour more, we're not going to win. How do you win? We win by creating an environment that employees say, I felt empowered. They engaged me. They care about wanting to develop me as a leader. They care about wanting, I see myself progressing here. As you look on those job sites, see what people are saying about you. How does an employee describe your organization? How does an employee describe working at it? That great culture. What are the values? What values do you stand for? And that's how you win in the workplace. And making sure winning in the workplace is getting the team involved. I had a wonderful organization. My first job was Dana Corporation, and we had facilities in Erie and Northeast, Brake Parts Incorporated. And we had 30 to 40 machining cells between two locations, and our machinists knew their business better than most at others. And by knowing their business, they understood the impact of quality. They understood a machine downtime, and we engaged them in these conversations, and they actually would lead tours of the facility. So can you imagine? And at your company, when you had the CEO of Dana Corporation, which was a multi-billion-dollar company, and he didn't meet with the first people that met him at the door and toured him throughout the facility were our machine operators, because they knew the business, and it was so important, the pride that they saw. And so, talking about a great culture is about involvement, engagement, making them feel a part of it. And that to me are some things that that's winning in the workplace. That's creating an environment that's special, unique, And everybody can do that here, right? I saw some of the people that are in the chat room. I know the companies. I know that you can have organizations where you engage your employees in different ways at different levels to make an impact. And so those are just a couple thoughts, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And I want to just show, I want to go backwards a little bit, and I want to show something to you again to see if it jumps out. Take a look at this particular text that was the follow-up text, right, to my attempt to salvage this candidate's interest. Again, an executive level candidate, right, on behalf of our client. What jumps out to you as it relates to what you just heard Aaron say? What are some things that might jump out to you? Well, one thing that should jump out to you, take a look. You know, Luann, absolutely, values, right? Culture, yes, Jessica. This candidate specifically said, listen, and by the way, our client did a phenomenal job of really articulating the unique value proposition of the culture, what a caring, you know, involved, sensitive, you know, high touch communication culture they had. And take a look, very interesting what they said. They said, listen, I'm noticing here that the actions I'm seeing in just by way of the follow-up I'm not getting in the timeline that I was told I would receive it, right, with a definitive answer. It's showing me that actions aren't matching the words, and I'm really being choosy about the type of culture that I'm looking for, right? So again, if you think candidates aren't savvy about that, think again, and it couldn't have painted the picture any better of first winning in the workplace, creating that great culture. And once you truly have that great culture, it's going to ooze through in all of your interactions with candidates, with existing employees who you want so desperately to retain, so that you can then win in the marketplace. So let's talk a little bit about winning in the marketplace, all right? How to go about collaborating and innovating in order to stay relevant. You know, this is something that is at top of mind to our team here, just in terms of our efforts to win in the marketplace, right? As we are representing many different employers and trying to help them land that ever elusive top talent that's tough to find, right? And so we talked during our first session about some of the things that we've done to really innovate and stay relevant in terms of winning in the marketplace. Amanda, Aaron, I hope you're comfortable with me putting you on the spot because it's something we've already talked about. But if you could just share, because I don't want people to get sick of hearing from me, right? The same old person. If either one or both of you could share, what are some things that we're doing to really try to shake up the way we're doing things, just not to pitch ourselves. I'm not interested in doing that. This is not a sales pitch, but we want to show you and give you examples of even things you can do differently to innovate and stay relevant to win in the marketplace with your recruitment efforts. So Aaron, Amanda, which one of you or both of you might be comfortable sharing that?
I'll jump in here.
Okay.
So I think, you know, when in the marketplace, the first thing that we've done is making sure we are evaluating our process and changing it to make sure that the candidate experience is different. That's a piece. The second is putting in place a process of making sure the pre-boarding for our candidates is unique, and which is something that we did not have, and make, so that the touch points are, because some of the positions that we've had to fill, there may be a lag between the start date. And so what are the touch points that we're working on? Working with clients and educating them on pre-boarding. For example, one of our clients did a care package for their new hire. It was a new hire. They sent the individual a company shirt, some other swag from the organization. and it created an environment with the candidate that was unique. The other piece that in the final one that I'll mention is where we've added an onboarding component to each of our recruiting pieces, where at 7 days we do a check-in with the organization, and that can, at 30, 60, 90, we're consistently checking in. So those are the things that actually companies can do. They don't, so you had a new hire, so we hired a machinist, and it's just joined your team. He or she just joined your team. Check in at 7 days. How's it going? What's happening? Are you feeling comfortable here, and do the consistent check-in. So those are just a few things that we believe are helping us or will help us win in the marketplace, Elizabeth.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. And really, I can't emphasize enough. It's really about being purposeful, intentional about what it is you need them to know, what it is that you need them to be, and what it is you need them to do when they walk in the door, really, and how much. And then from there, right, defining what it is you want, what it is you need, how much, and to what extent at other touch points. Like you said, when you walk, like Aaron just said, before they walk in the door, what it is that would check those boxes of what it is you want them to know, be, and do. 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 1 year, 5 years, really being intentional about defining that and articulating that in a very purposeful way. In addition to that, let's talk about your rate of hire. It is ever so important to contact candidates directly. No more generic emails. And I can't even believe how many are still going out there. Thank you for your resume. We'll contact you if we're interested, or, our team will be evaluating your credentials. And if we deem there's a match, someone will be in touch with you. That isn't going to fly. That paints a picture of your culture, right? And what type of picture does that paint? Amanda, what are your thoughts? What type of picture does that paint about an organization's culture when they get a generic email, or worse yet, no email or follow through at all?
Yeah, so I think, the common thread, if you've, through the comments that Aaron and Elizabeth have been making, the common thread here is communication, right? So candidates are expecting more communication, more personalized communication. And when I say more, I mean frequency. They want to know what's going on. They want to feel like they're part of your organization, like they know what's going on, they know what to expect. And I'm going to talk a lot about this in my session next week, where we talk about employer branding and how that kind of fits into the pre-boarding, onboarding, and even actually offboarding processes. But I think, there's, when you're out there telling people about what a great place to work this is, and we care about our people, and then they get a very generic, cold rejection that doesn't even give them any insight into why they were rejected, that doesn't align for them. So the likelihood of them coming back to apply for a different position that they may be eligible for, the likelihood is significantly reduced. And so I think that's something that we are altering as we work with clients, is having an understanding of the complete picture from their very first touch point, where they, do a search and your company comes up as having an open position, to, all the way through their time with the organization. So just understanding how you're communicating your culture, and are you really practicing what you preach? You can say this is a great place to work all you want, but if you're every step of the way not following along with that in absolutely every aspect, candidates are going to see right through that.
Mhm. And really what we're talking about, as the next slide suggests, is what Stephen Covey calls a trust and inspire culture, right? So it does all start with culture. And there's the old way, the way it used to be, the way that many of us probably remember it being when we first joined the workforce, and the way, quite honestly, many organizations could still get away with being pre-pandemic. It was very compliance focused, right? Here are the rules, you have to follow them, and that's no questions asked. It was all about coordinating the efforts of groups. Okay, here's what you need to do. XYZ group, here's what you need to do. Here's when you need to do it. Now go. It was all about really maintaining the status quo, controlling and containing the work and the efforts that your employees were putting forth. And it was about winning the war for labor. And what we'd like to suggest is, overcoming the barriers that exist. And I'm going to hit you hard with one barrier that's pretty substantial. And that is the barrier that prevents you from being where it is you need to be now. And really the biggest barrier to be really developing the type of culture you need in order to win the war for talent, not the war for labor, because anyone can get bodies through the door, right? But it's about keeping them there. And it's about making sure you get, you get people as a whole in through your door, and that you really care for them as a whole person, right? They're not pieces of equipment or machinery. But the biggest barrier to having the culture you need in order to win the war for talent is falsely thinking that you're already there. Let me say that again. The biggest barrier to winning the war for talent and developing the culture you need in order to do so is falsely thinking you're already there. So let me describe what that means. Now, we talked about, the old way, right? The command and control way of doing things on the left. But on the right, this is what we're suggesting your culture needs to reflect today. And not just the culture of how it is you operate, but the culture that will then ooze through in everything you do, including your recruitment process, including your onboarding process, your pre-boarding process, your retention efforts. So no longer is about compliance, but it's about really getting everyone to commit to wanting to do the right thing. It's a choice. It's not a commandment they're following, but it's a choice. And why would they want to make that choice? Well, because you have leadership that are creating the culture to get them excited about not only understanding, but making a choice to do the right thing and be committed to it. They would run through walls for you, right? And it's about collaborating, not isolating people to only focus on their piece of the pie, but it's about getting people cross-functionally to collaborate and get different perspectives. It's about really, what can you do to continually evolve and innovate as an organization, not just maintaining the status quo. If you're finding, hey, we've never done it this way before, we don't want to change, it's always worked fine for us in the past, that would be an indicator that you probably don't have the most innovative mindset, right? And it's about releasing, unleashing, and inspiring those who work with you, as opposed to really controlling and containing them into what it is you think they can be, but rather getting out of their way and giving them the runway to be the best that they can be. So what does that mean in terms of what, the fundamental beliefs of someone who's more in line with a trust and inspire leader the way it needs today? Well, I would encourage you to take a look at yourselves, take a look at those who are hiring managers, take a look at those who are in senior level leadership roles of influence over your recruitment retention efforts, and ask yourselves, are these people who believe that people are people as a whole and that believe their job is to inspire, not merely to motivate? Are these people individual, or am I someone who really believes there's enough for everyone? Enough trust, enough respect, enough empathy, enough value for everyone, and that my job is to be caring rather than to impede upon what it is we need to do to attract and retain our talent? Is my job, and are those who are having a huge role in influencing our processes for retention and attraction, do they believe that their job, their leadership is stewardship? And therefore, do they see their job as to putting service to the candidate, to employees, above their own self-interest? Do those who are in a position to influence your recruitment and retention efforts, do you and they believe that enduring influence is created from the inside out, and therefore they believe that their job is to go first and lead the way to be innovative and not be afraid to try something different during these times where everything has been flipped around? And last but not least, do you, as the person responsible for recruitment and retention efforts, and/or do those senior in your organization who are responsible for it, do you and they believe that people have greatness inside of them, and that includes candidates and employees? And therefore the job at hand for you is to unleash their potential rather than to control them? These are questions to ask yourself, and to go one step further and ask yourself, okay, well, if I do, and if I see myself that way, how are we demonstrating that in our recruitment efforts? How are we demonstrating that in our pre-boarding efforts? How are we demonstrating that in our onboarding efforts? And how are we demonstrating that to the employees who are already with us? So we would like to spend the last handful of minutes here focusing upon 4 core areas that, based upon our research, based upon what we're experiencing, what we're seeing, and quite frankly, based upon even some failed attempts that we've made, right? We've boiled it down to a 4-pronged approach to win the war. And again, it's the war for talent, not the war for labor. So really, you first have to develop a strategy that is aimed at addressing the root of the barriers that exist. Now, earlier in today's session, someone had mentioned, yes, and I forget who it was, I'm so sorry, but someone had mentioned in the chat feature, hey, it's hard to even find entry-level employees, especially here in the manufacturing environment, entry-level machinists to come in and do what it is that they need to do, and let alone find people to train, right? Well, there are very unique roots to the barriers that exist in each of your organizations that are represented on this call. And it's really got to start first and foremost by evaluating your hiring processes. Now, what do I mean when I say evaluating your hiring processes? Obviously, you have to make sure you have a highly effective recruitment process. So we would suggest really digging deep, delving into every single step in your recruitment process, and really doing so through a fresh pair of eyes to try to uncover any roadblocks or even bottlenecks that might be preventing you from fast tracking the hiring process. And we're not talking about taking shortcuts that will put in jeopardy your quality of hire. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about things that you can do that would cut down on the more laborious, time-consuming hiring process that's more traditional to what many of us started out with, which we talked about in session 1. And as one of you just suggested, you're absolutely right. Candidates are no longer, Nick, they're no longer wanting to spend hours surfing job boards or 40 or more postings. And quite honestly, they don't have to, Nick, right? They don't have to. They need fast, easy. They need mobile friendly. And I love what you said, Nick. You're absolutely right. You can't wait till the end of the week to get back to these candidates. They are expecting, and quite honestly, if they're not getting it from you, they're getting it from your neighbor next door who isn't having as tough of a time recruiting people. And that is, they need a response within 24 hours, within a day. So take a look at what it is your hiring process is, and really look at it through fresh eyes, through critical eyes, to try to evaluate what bottlenecks or roadblocks currently exist. The next thing that we would suggest is to evaluate your candidate experience. Now, we are purposely chunking out the candidate experience from the hiring process, because really they're not necessarily one and the same. And again, we all know that it's a candidate-driven market, right? But do you truly understand the candidate experience through their eyes? I would suggest strongly, and I know Erin and Amanda would suggest as well, having a focus group, facilitating a focus group, talk to new hires, do a survey, whatever it is you'd like to do, but really try to understand and gather insights on what they found to be most difficult, what they found to be the easiest part of your process, what they found to be most frustrating, what they found to be most helpful about your application process, your interview process, your hiring process, your onboarding process. Gather that information. And you can't gather it by talking to the other members of your team who facilitate it. You need to talk to it. You need to learn about that by talking to your customer. And your customer, in this instance, of course, those are candidates who then became employees. They chose to work with you. I would also encourage you to go through your hiring process, right? Actually go through your hiring process to do your best to get an authentic perspective of what it's like to actually go through it from the moment you apply throughout the interview process and so on and so forth. Now it's tough depending on the size and setup of your organization, for some of you to do that, but certainly, you could enlist the assistance of someone from the outside to assist you with that work. It's kind of like a secret shopper, right? It's secret shopping your interview process, but it's very important to go through the hiring process and get that experience and really evaluate it from that perspective. The next thing that we want to really encourage you to take a look at in this four-pronged approach to winning the war on talent is to take a look at your employer brand. And this really, everything we're saying, to be honest, ties very nicely into the previous slide, which is focused, of course, upon understanding first winning in the workplace, how to win in the workplace, and then you can win in the marketplace. So we're just demonstrating that through this four-pronged approach we're recommending. But evaluate your employer brand. I mean, all of you, like it or not, you all have an employer brand, but I guarantee the majority of you don't really know what that employer brand is. Therefore, you're not really working in an intentional, purposeful way to portray the brand that you want portrayed and to demonstrate it through your actions. So what is an employer brand? Well, again, Amanda's going to talk about that in its entirety in the third session, but really it reflects how people truly feel about working for your organization and how attractive your organization is to people from the outside that you're trying to appeal to, right? And the only way to manage your employer brand effectively is to start by intentionally building the brand you want and then follow it up by measuring and monitoring that brand. And we're talking about tracking specific KPIs that will be unique to the brand you want to build, right? Which, oh, by the way, the brand you want to build and the areas of opportunity within that, and therefore the KPIs that and the metrics you want to measure will be based largely upon what it is you uncover through the evaluation of your hiring process and your candidate experience, right? So it's getting to the root of the barriers that exist. And then from there, sure, let's take a look at your compensation. Let's take a look at your benefit offerings and see how competitive you are. And there's a lot you can do for internal compensation analysis, as well as just taking a look at how you compare to other organizations who are similar in size or scope or region as to what it is you're doing. But it's not all about the compensation. And so many clients are coming to us saying, we're having a hard time hiring people. I think we need to evaluate our compensation. Well, maybe, and perhaps, and probably, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. Amanda, Erin, anything you'd like to share as we prepare to wrap for today? I know we have about 30 seconds left. Any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share with the group?
I think the one thing, whoops, sorry, Erin.
You go, Amanda, you go.
I think the one thing that comes to mind for me is just rehashing that point I made earlier and kind of the common theme of today's session, which is around communication. I think we're in a position currently where you can't really over communicate with candidates at this point. they want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. They want to know where they are in the process. And they want specific information. You know, that generic communication that we've used in the past, it doesn't work. So that, I think, is one of the big takeaways from me today.
Okay.
Great, Amanda. I think the only thing I would add, I'd add a challenge. And the challenge is for everyone in today's session. What's the one thing you're going to do differently? Because you put an hour of your time in to watching, you know, this webinar, and many of you have joined the first one, and now we've got another one scheduled for next Tuesday. What are you going to do differently? What's one thing that you can do differently with things that you've learned today? That's it. It's more of a challenge than anything. And I think that's the piece that we all have to take away. And we're trying to take our own medicine. What's the one thing we'll do differently? And that's what we did after the last session. And we're going to challenge ourselves after this. So what's the one thing you're going to do differently as a leader, as a, you know, head recruiter, whatever your role there in your organization is? What's the one thing you'll do differently with the information you gained today?
Right, excellent. And I answered Kathy's question in the chat box, and not just for Kathy, but for everybody. If you have any follow-up questions whatsoever, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to myself or to Amanda, or certainly to Erin as well, Erin Phillips. Same exact email, except it's Erin Phillips with 2 L's, 1 P at decisionassociates.net. Thank you so much, everybody. We hope you found today's time to be useful and youthful, I guess. I had youth on my mind. I guess that was a Freudian slip. But enjoy the rest of your week and have a wonderful day. Thank you.